All right, so as promised, Fusion Part 2. Let's get it. So I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, and obviously there's a ton of changes in game to prices and market and what things have been looking like recently. So I want to talk about those things. Obviously, the biggest one that we've all known was going to be huge was changing your blueprint scrolls into ascension shards. We knew that that was going to be a huge one and one that was going to completely change the game. When you've got 5,000 research scrolls and now you can change those into 1,000 ascension shards, it's amazing. It is very expensive right now with current prices. It's about 3 million per ascension shard, which is insanely expensive. It's like 6 gems per shard type of thing if you do conversion, but still, it's fantastic that you can now do that in the game. Also, we've seen a huge change to the prices of chests, which is interesting because one of the main ways that a lot of us were converting gold to gems before was through chests, but now that's completely changing because now there's so many more chests in the game, where these have been maxed for the longest time and we're selling for 3 gems after tax consistently across the board. And now obviously that's changed drastically. They were selling for the longest time even for 5 gems after, depending on what the prices were at and stuff. These ones for the longest time were selling for 3 gems after, and now, or 2 gems after, and now, you know, obviously that market is completely crashed and that's no longer a viable way to do it unless you're really patient. But it's just interesting how the market has completely changed now that more chests are being introduced into the game. And we knew that that was going to happen, but not to this scale and as quickly. Because even if you now do these bosses and you get a key and you can quickly just transfer that over, that's, you know, 5 million for one key that you're very rarely going to get that much value from. So a lot of lower level players are able to get value from their keys now. And so many more chests are being added into the game. Another thing that's really interesting is when we go to component prices, for a couple of months there, a lot of the lower level components were close to max value, if not max value. And so many people were only doing the highest level of quests. And so there was, you know, a decent supply of the higher components, but the lower components, like these, were at 125,000, or there was none of them. These were 175,000 for the longest time, for months. And now they're half or a third of the price that they were before. And so with the ability to make components now, I think crafting is now much more viable because it's actually profitable and you're able to make a lot more from it, which is really nice, especially for lower level players where they're like, man, there's nothing we can do. There's not enough components in the market and we're losing money by crafting. Whereas now they can actually make money by crafting items. So it's actually really nice because it's changed the dynamic of the game where it's not as top heavy, but it's now evenly spread, which I think is really, really nice. Another thing that I think has drastically changed is end game blue items. Like blue items past tier 8 are what's needed to make ascension shards. Before, you would often find these types of items for barely over double. So for example, you'd barely be finding any of these items for like just over surcharge value. So this one would be like 1.4 million, whereas now it's 3.8. So almost triple value for these items that before were selling for basically nothing. Which means that a lot of the items before that people were crafting and they're like, sweet, I finally got a flawless tier 8, like this is awesome, and they look and it's like, oh, this is 1.5 million, that's it, and it's brutal. Now they can sell that for triple the price that they were before. So it actually adds so much more value to end game items, which is really nice. Like even if we go to purple items, often before, even we got to the point that tier 10 epics were selling for double surcharge value, like brutal. And now, because of the demand on these types of items, you're not going to find them for less than at least, you know, 4 million type of thing per item. So at least this is now selling for 3.5, 4 times base value instead of just double. And so now, because of all of this, crafting is much more viable of a money-making method because you're actually able to make money and components are so much cheaper. Where if you're crafting anything that's of any rarity, at least you're getting 4 million a pop instead of barely surcharge value, and it's not even worthwhile crafting because you can make so much more, right? Like this adds value to tier 8 and up any rarity of items. And I think also, if you think about this, if you go even superior tier 8 items, and you can find really cheap ones, like 400k type of thing. You can combine 5 of these to make a flawless, right? So if you go 400k times 5, it's 2 million. You combine all of those and you can then sell it for 4 million. This now means that you can make 1.5 million gold with one crafting slot in less than an hour. Right? So if you use 10 crafting slots, that's 15 million gold in less than an hour every time, even if you have max energy, because this is now needed in the flawless. And I think that that's always going to be the case. There's always going to be a demand for these items because everyone's always going to have a surcharge or a surplus of research scrolls late game. And so this is really cool because it adds more money making methods. It adds more value to late game items. It adds more of like a dynamic market rather than what it was before. It allows mid game players to actually be able to craft profitably now because of what Fusion has added to the game with chests and components. Like all across the board, I think that this is a positive change for the game as a whole. What I really like about this is so often before when we went to our inventories, there was so many items that were completely useless before, right? Like you would see, I had like 70 compasses before, 70 bronze compasses, which are like 20% faster. Doesn't really do a whole lot, and I'm not going to sit there and use 70 of them for the most part. But now I can combine those and make either 30 silver or 10 gold, and then I can get through tower really really quickly if I need to. It saves me a ton of gems. It gets rid of useless items. Of course, the classic one is blueprint scrolls, where a lot of us had thousands of them left over. But I think it adds so much more depth to the end game where there's not as many wasted items that are just sitting around not doing anything, and there's actually a use for late game items. It'll be interesting to see now what this does to those of us who want to converting gold to gems, because before it was just like, okay, these chests always sell for 1 million, therefore I'm always going to get 2 gems out of it, period. Easy. And even if it takes a couple of days, no problem. I know I'm still getting 450k per gem. But now that this is changing, I really don't know what that's going to look like, because eventually, other than golden chests, eventually everything's going to be at 2 gems across the board. And you already see it. Like you look at market, there's not a consistent way that you can transfer with chests anymore, because everything's 2 gems, 2 gems, 2 gems, 2 gems, 2 gems, 2 gems. These are going to be 2 gems sooner or later. They've gone from 1 million down to 700k in the last week, and they're going to keep going down, and these eventually will just be at 100k because players can just do the bossing, make 500k, and for lower level players that's a decent amount of money, right? And so sooner or later all of these chests are going to be at a lower value. They're all going to be at 2 gems, and there's not going to be a quick way to transfer over gold to gems. And so I think that there's going to have to be new ways that we figure out how to transfer that over. But I really don't know what the gold to gem ratio is going to change to, because if you look at this normally, the best ratio that you can get is 250 gems for 100 mil, which is 400k per gem. So generally speaking, most endgame players are not going to want to be transferring over more than 450k per gem, because there's no point, because most of that is being used to invest at late game, and the gold has more value than the gem has because you're able to invest the gold more effectively than it is like per gem, right? So it seems like the ceiling for gems should be 450k per gem, but as we're seeing, that's not the case right now. Like if we even go to enchants like tier 9 blues, which is kind of the staple a lot of the time, like these are still decent ratios. It's not horrible, but still you're looking at over 500k per, if not worse than that a lot of the time, especially when you factor in tax and all of that stuff. And so I'm wondering what it's going to be down the road when potentially it could get to more than 500k per gem, or even closer to 1 million per gem if you're just buying it straight from market. Although that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you look at the investment needed. 250 gems for 100 million gold, 400k per gem should be kind of ceiling for late game, unless people are just using all of their in-game gold to still get their upgrades done and their shop expands and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really interested to see what the market's going to do long term, but I really do think that the change with Fusion, both for not having wasted items late game and having more use all around for all of your items, adding value to late game crafts, tier 8 and above, flawless and above, which I think is amazing. It's a really good change. Reducing the component prices, which is really helpful for, I think, all players, especially those who are crafting still. Adding value to late game players who are sitting at max energy and still able to use their crafting slots for profit, which is amazing. You're still able to make money with crafting slots even at max energy. And obviously chest prices changing drastically. So there's a lot of changes in game, a lot that's changed in market, but I think it's all really good changes. It's just there's going to be an adjustment period for those of us who've been utilizing those things for a long time to now figure out a new way to use the things that we've been using for a long time to get our gems or to utilize markets. So that's pretty much all I want to talk about today. Hopefully all that made sense. If you guys have any questions or have more input, I'd love to hear it. I'm sure I missed a ton of stuff, a ton of things that we can talk about in the future. But hope you enjoyed, and hope you guys are having a wonderful holidays. And thanks for watching as always. Love you guys. Have a great day. Have a great week. Have a wonderful holiday, and I'll talk to you all soon. Peace out.